like, yeah, so I'm like, oh, okay, it's a lesson. It's a lesson to be learned.
Okay, is everybody seated who wants to be seated for this exciting, cosy event? Welcome. If you haven't been to this before, this is sort of the strand of the festival we're calling Meet the Practitioner or Meet the Puppeteer. So we had Gavin Glover on Monday, and we've got Stephen Mottram later in the week. We've also got, I need to plug the
Steve Duran.
Steve Duran?
Yeah.
When is that?
That's on Saturday.
That's on Saturday.
Yeah.
I should remember that I'm doing that. Yes. So lots of exciting things, and we are delighted to have from Blind Summit, Fiona, and I always forget your second name.
Oh, that's right. I thought you were forgetting my first name then. I'd be like, that's a bit embarrassing after we've done a day of workshop together. Fiona Clift.
Fiona Clift, a big round of applause.
Good name.
So the idea of these events is really as flexible as possible. Would invite as many questions as possible from the audience, and also kind of cater it to what you're interested in as well. If there's a particular part of puppetry or performance that you'd like to talk to Fiona about, then this is your opportunity. We're also filming this for the YouTubes, just to make you aware. So this may be this beautiful moment is going to be captured online forever. So Fiona, I thought a good way of starting, just in case people aren't familiar with your work, if you could just kind of describe a bit about your background and your involvement with Blind Summit.
So I started working with Blind Summit about 7-8 years ago as an assistant director. So my background is I did a degree in drama and theatre arts, thought I was going to go and be a director, did lots of assisting at the Royal Court and the Gate, new writing, blah blah, then assisted Mark and Nick on a show they did called 1984, and was like, oh, these guys seem like they're having fun, I want to be an actor like them, maybe I'll go and learn how to be an actor and I'll be a better director. And then went to train as an actor at a school called LISPA, which is the London International School of Performing Arts, which is the Lecoq School in London, which is actually now in Berlin. And no, it's still called London International School of Performing Arts. I can't change LISPA to BISPA, it's just a bit embarrassing. Anyway, so I then sort of had tricked myself into becoming an actor, and have basically been acting ever since. And as soon as I sort of graduated, ended up kind of back with Blind Summit doing bits of performing and directing, and sort of just have been part of the furniture ever since, really. So I very much came to puppetry really only through Blind Summit. Like, I haven't done any puppetry for any other puppet companies. Like, I've done bits of puppet direction, and weirdly enough I do another show that is puppets as well, but it's sort of humanette puppets, which is like the puppets with like your head on them. So I've sort of weirdly fallen into puppetry in like quite a strange way. So I really only know the Blind Summit sort of style of puppetry in terms of like, I've seen other stuff, but I can sort of only talk about that method basically. So that's good, so I'm specialised. But yeah, so now I'm just acting with them basically. I also do other acting roles as well, like straight acting, not just puppetry. So yeah, and I'm about to do The Feet of Moses on the Table, which is great. So that's kind of the show that a lot of people will know. Yeah. So yeah.
Excellent. So I just thought I'd start something you mentioned in the workshop, that you were embarrassed for a long time by calling yourself a puppeteer.
Still embarrassed.
Do you label yourself a puppeteer now?
No, I usually tell people I'm an actor.
Okay, and what is
actor
the
puppeteer? Yeah,
actor puppeteer?
Yeah, my website. My website says actor, puppeteer, and director.
Ah, so it's sandwiched in the middle there.
Sandwiched, exactly. I think that's a good place to be, the meat of the work.
So what for you is the relationship between acting and puppetry? Are there major differences, or are there major similarities for you?
That's a good question. I kind of see it as this, like, it's exactly the same thing. So I've learnt loads about acting through doing puppetry, and loads about puppetry through doing acting. So for me, it's like the same thing. I suppose the difference in the puppetry strand of my work, I would sort of see it as, I also do bits of design as well for Blind Summit. So I design puppets and devise and write for puppets, so I sort of combine that under sort of the puppet strand of stuff. So I would feel, you know, I'm not a puppeteer in a sense of like, I haven't trained in puppetry, like I haven't like done puppetry training. Like at Lecoq you do like object manipulation, bits of mask work, a lot of physical performance, a lot of, so that's really where my training is, and that's where I feel really comfortable saying like, I'm a physical performer. I don't quite know, I think there's a puppeteer, someone that only does I don't know very many people that only do puppetry.
Okay, that's interesting.
I suppose. But yeah, I'm a puppeteer. I say that to people, as I said, it's just embarrassing when you're on a date and you're like, I'm a puppeteer. People think it's really cool, but like I'm like obviously just an art school student at heart, so I'm a bit like, yeah, puppeteer. Yeah.
Well, I mean, part of this, the training strands moving parts is really trying to open it up to actors and open it up to other performers. I wondered if you had any thoughts about like what actors can learn from doing puppetry courses, or
keep them out. Don't let them in. Don't let actors do more puppetry.
Why is
Sorry.
that? That's so interesting. I think that a bit like, I don't really. What can actors bring? Sorry, what was the question?
So I guess in my head, the sort of acknowledging puppetry as sort of physical, visual theatre.
Yeah.
And that there are perhaps sort of elements of puppetry that, from your work with Blind Summit, that you think could sort of inform actors in their work, maybe.
So I think it really helps to externalise emotions. So I think often, like I've done a lot of acting classes that I've loved at a place called the Actors Centre, where I still go. And what's so amazing about those workshops is they kind of debunk all the myths about acting and make it like super practical. So they're like, be on your centre, like this is how you prepare a monologue, like make it external, make it physical, like emotion, it's not magic is like the thing they say all the time. And I think puppetry makes acting like not magic. You're like, of course you feel something, but like you can do it without feeling it like every single time. And I suppose I trained in physical theatre, so I believe that anyway. I don't think it's magic, basically.
Yes.
Because you have to be able to do it like every day.
Yeah,
So
well, that's something you were saying in the workshop. There's a whole sort of what's this doing? What's this doing? And
yeah.
I think that's a really, in my head, that's a really helpful discipline. Kind of just thinking about kind of the physicality and thinking about it really practically, instead of sort of kind of going off on, it's an interesting way of working.
Yeah, so I find it quite difficult to work very, very technically. Like, oh, maybe if I just move there and then how does the weight go there? Like, I find that quite hard. Whereas if you say, and I know people that do really work like that, I find it really easy if you're like, oh, just make him really angry. I'm like, okay, because then I can just think really angry, and then I'm like, oh, that's easy. Like, I know how to make a cup of tea when I'm pissed off. Most mornings. You know, it's that makes it easy, and then you know what to do. So it's a way of like getting yourself into the right headspace, I suppose. We talk a lot about this on the table, or Mark tells me like this. It's about getting in the right headspace. That's a lot of the training, is getting into the right space so that you can perform, which is the same as acting, where it's like a certain type of focus that you just don't have in any other space in your life, I don't think.
And we should say Mark and...
So yeah, sorry, Mark Down and Nick Barnes. And so Nick, who's not also doing design here, he set up Blind Summit in 1997 and then hired Mark as an actor. Mark also trained as an actor, Mark Down. And then they ran Blind Summit together for like 18 years. And now Nick is now freelance and still works in puppet design. And Mark still runs Blind Summit, and Blind Summit still exists and produces its own shows and does puppetry for other does puppetry for other shows. And Nick still works as an associate artist, so still will design puppets and stuff. So yeah, just to clarify.
Excellent. Okay. Well, hopefully we've sort of warmed the atmosphere. Is that the right term? I don't know. Anyway, we're saying that it's time to open up for questions. If you could keep questions relatively short, we haven't got a huge amount of time, and just be mindful. If you've spoken a lot, then give someone else a go as well. Okay. So, any questions?
I'm sorry about the heckle earlier. Sorry, it just came out. But I also wanted to ask,
Blind Summit, I think, has really successfully collaborated with a lot of other practitioners in terms of putting puppets into like Madame Butterfly and doing a lot of collaborations with like the Royal Opera House and that sort of thing. And do you think there's a particular way that Blind Summit works that makes them very suited to that, or is it? Yeah, I'm just intrigued because there's not that many. A lot of other companies are asked to build puppets for other productions. Very few companies are asked to do puppetry for other productions, and I think Blind Summit's been excellent at that over the years.
Yeah. What is that? I suppose it comes from like the thing that I think that Blind Summit do is they try and make they're sort of like anything as possible with puppets, but they also put the puppeteer at the centre of their work. Yeah. So it's not just about the puppet, so it's quite rare they'll make a puppet and then be like, yeah, cool, like, see you later. I think that does happen, but I think it's because it's always, the question is always like, who is the puppeteer, why a puppet, like why puppetry. So there's always, and also within our own work, within the work that Blind Summit produces, like there's the dramaturgical discussions are so intense and long because it is like such a big deal to put like a puppet in a play. Like, why would you make a play with puppets? There's no repertoire, like in terms of like written shows, like Punch and Judy, I suppose. So, and writing for puppets is really hard because ultimately it is a puppet. Like, we're all aware of the puppeteers, like standing there. So who are they? What's their attitude? Like, why are they holding puppets? I think it's quite hard when you don't address that, and that's sort of why, coming back to why I get embarrassed about being a puppeteer, is that I find that puppetry quite difficult because it's like, why are you doing it with puppets? And of course there's amazing shows that address that, but I think that's why I love Blind Summit's work, is because it always addresses that question. And then the puppetry becomes quite easy to do when you know like what your attitude is. So we did an opera called Le Rossignol in Bregenz 2 years ago, and we were cubist artists. The puppeteers were cubist artists, so it's like so fun. You're like, brilliant, I just get to like be an artist and do puppetry like an artist. And so suddenly your whole reason for being on stage is fine. And I think it's really hard as a puppeteer to be on stage and be like, I'm just here to move this thing, but why? Like, why am I doing that? And that's hard for the director because they're like, because I just want a puppet. I've never actually had that happen. But, you know, you're like, what is my attitude? I think TV puppetry, again, is like different because you're like, that's a whole style and you're not necessarily going to see the puppeteer.
Yeah, you just get painted out. And
yeah, exactly. And you're like, okay, that's cool. I just have to make this thing look alive. That's fine. That's my job. So, yeah, I think that's why it's different. And I know Madame Butterfly, I think the puppet was really central. But when Mark and Nick do the puppet on that show, which they did originally, like, I think it was Carolyn or Anthony Miguel that was like, oh, it's just different when you guys do the puppet. And it kind of is because they're like, everything had been leading up to that moment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the investment is really high.
Yeah, and they're like all of their training and years of working out how that puppet moves, and they designed it. It's like, so yeah, they can make things that the puppet do things that like other people can't, you know, just because they believe that they can do it. And you guys have experienced that in the workshop. You're like, oh no, I can't do it because of this, and you're like, you definitely can.
Yeah, it's a lot about letting go, isn't it? It's just kind of, because you said a lot of times, the building isn't going to collapse. We're not going to die. It's like having that confidence.
Yeah, I think that was actually something I didn't learn actually necessarily from Blind Summit, but my drama teacher at LISPA said we're doing melodrama. And everyone was like, kind of being like, oh, I want to be really subtle. and he was like, he's German, he's like, what do you think's going to happen if you get emotional? Like, the ground's going to swallow you up? And you're like, he's like, why not try it? See what happens. Maybe we're going to like it. And you're like, oh, cool, okay. Like, of course you need to go there, and then you pull it back. Which sounds, no matter how many times you hear that, you're like, okay, cool, yeah, of course I need to do it, live it 1000%, that's what good actors do. Leonardo DiCaprio is not sitting at home being like, oh yeah, I'm just going to pull it back on that breakdown. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's going for it. That's why we love it, I suppose. Anyway,
Wonderful.
Slight digression.
No, it's fabulous. We had another question here.
Yeah, I'd really like to hear more about as you were talking about the Blind Summit style.
Yeah.
And your favourite bits.
Ooh, what do I really love about it? There's a puppet in they did for a Complicité show called Shunkin, which actually And that was when I sort of like fell in love with the Blind Summit style. There's something about it's like super simple, so beautiful. It's just not how when someone says puppet to me, I often imagine like paper mache, and that like really scares me. Like I really hate paper mache things. I don't know why, but I suppose it's the first type of puppet I'd seen, which doesn't mean it's the only type of puppet that exists because there's obviously loads of puppet companies making beautiful puppets. It's the first time I'd seen something that was like. That I thought was really beautiful. I was like, wow, that's like an amazing sculpture. Like the face was incredible. Like the way it moved. I was like, oh wow, like that's cool. Like I thought it was really cool. Yeah, it's a human figure, and yeah, the face and the style of it, the sort of original bunraku that they made, are just so beautiful. And the one in Madame Butterfly is so gorgeous as well. Like the face, the hands are amazing. It's so characterful, and I think that's why it all feels like it's always character led. And that's what I really love about it. It's kind of why I like theatre. So I just love characters. So, and like love the stories. So, and all of their work is character driven, I think. Yeah,
Does
that's
bunraku
what I love.
inspire a lot of?
So yeah, it started off as kind of like reinterpreting bunraku. I think there was one of their first shows was called Mr. China's Son, which was a bunraku puppet. They're based on about an old man in China.
Could you just briefly describe what bunraku puppetry
Yeah, so
is?
bunraku puppetry is 3-man operated puppetry. I won't go into the whole history of it because I'll probably get it wrong. You could Wikipedia's the best place. But yeah, so usually one person on the head and a hand, one person on the back and a hand, and then one person on the feet.
But it is a tradition that comes from...
Yeah, actually comes from China, but it sort of came to fruition in Japan.
Okay, yeah.
It's so funny, I was teaching some students last week, and there was like half of them were Chinese, and one of them was Japanese, and then they were like, isn't bunraku Japanese? And then one of them was like, yeah, but everything originates in China. Like, so great. I was like, okay, I've really stepped into some like bad journey. So anyway, so yeah, that's rich. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
But you were saying about bunraku inspiring the...
Yeah, so it started off, Nick Barnes, the designer, has made bunraku puppets. And then it was just about how to move those. And so yeah, it's kind of has its roots in bunraku, but very much its own style. Just working out what each of the parts of the body can do and what the puppet can do, basically. So yeah, but the puppets are very much like actors. Again, like that's kind of how they're treated, as well as like it should be as good as an actor. Should be, if not better.
Did we have a question at the back?
Yeah, just the thing about magic. You keep saying it's not magic, like that's a comforting thing. And I don't know, I just kind of feel like it is. If it ever was for you, was there like a point at which it being magic was unpractical, or was that something you actively moved away from, or has it always been a comfort to...
No, I think as soon as something's magic, it's actually, as it's something that I say, I think Mark says it quite a lot, as soon as you think it's magic, it's impossible to repeat, because you're like, oh, that just happened once, or I have to feel it, or something, and you're like, how does that help when it's not working? Like it doesn't, basically. So it isn't magic, basically. Like I don't believe in magic.
Between an audience member and a performer, isn't it, really?
Yeah,
As
exactly.
a practitioner, it's not helpful to think of the experience of magic for the audience, because
Yeah, I can't-
you have to do it night after night.
Yeah, I can't say to someone like a colleague that I was in a show at Christmas, I can't be like, why isn't the magic there tonight, babe? Like, it's like, I'm like, okay, so why wasn't that working? It felt like, it seemed like we weren't picking up on the cues, or your director says you weren't picking up on the cues, that's why you weren't getting the laughs. It wasn't like the magic of comedy. I don't think. I mean, if you speak to any comedian, there's no magic in their stand-up. It's like pure.
I think what we have is a different definition of magic.
What's your definition of magic?
I kind of feel like there's space for both. I kind of like all that technical stuff is there, and then when it works, it's magic. Like when I watch something really work, like it's like that is what.
Oh yeah, of course. That feels like magic. I suppose it's not useful when you're about to go on stage and you're trying to find each other on a puppet.
Yeah.
And like your director's like, what the fuck, guys? Like,
I think,
excuse my
yeah,
language.
but
You're not
I
there.
think that as soon as you look for it, it's not going to be there. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's something about that, like you talked again in the workshop today about that aha moment. You know, that like, oh, and we've got it. And I think sometimes that's what people refer to.
Yeah, and I think that comes from like focusing and all getting into the same space, basically. You know, when an ensemble's working really well together, or like you're all working really well together on the puppets because you're really focused on what you're doing. It's not because like you put on your magic cape,
wave your magic wand.
Although for some people they might, you know, I don't know. That's just anyway.
Got a question just here.
Yeah, it's following up on the magic conversation really, because I fear that if you think that technically you can suss it, then it becomes quite a religious exercise. And just let me expand a little bit on this. I was at a talk recently by Fiona McDermott, and his mantra is listen to the puppet. Don't do anything unless the puppet tells you what to do. And it sounds like you've got fabulously well-trained puppets. I've never seen a Blind Summit show, but I really want to. And I can understand that when you're operating three together, you have to find their mind. So tell us a little bit more about, how it stays a technical experience that you can do that, but it doesn't lose the mystery, the whole purpose, because a puppet can do so much more than an actor.
But yeah, don't get me wrong, when I say it's really not a technical exercise, when I say there's no magic, when I think of technical, I think of someone being like, move your right head, move your right hand, move your left hand. Like, I never ever speak like that or think about it like that, ever. It's totally about intention and like what you're doing in a scene. Like, it's never, and like what you're feeling. That, like, it's really about breaking it down into intention. It's not about, so it's exactly like acting. That's where the acting thing comes in. So it's never about breaking it down technically. There are, I think I was talking about this today, there are technical things you need to rehearse, but I don't think of a show, like I would never go in, and I really can't do it actually. Like, again, there are some people that are good at it. I can't think of it like that. As soon as I start, we're rehearsing the table at the moment, and when I watch the video before and I'm like, get all the blocking down, I'm like, have it all technically in my head, I literally can't do it. I'm not, because I'm not acting, so I'm not thinking on the moment. So, and when you say follow the puppet, so that's like part number one, how I think about it. And part number two of that is, so there's three things when you say follow the puppet, like completely, it's about what the puppet's doing. Obviously, when you literally think about that, there's the puppet, what it looks like, what it's saying. So if it's like standing in a certain way and it's suggesting something to you, that's what it's doing. That's it. Like, it's in the room. Like, the audience can see it, you can see it. Like, that's what it's doing. This is what the puppet looks like. And then obviously you've got your two other puppeteers that are on the puppet. So that all of those things combined make up. And then there's what the audience is seeing. So we were talking about this today. If it's in the room that, like, the puppet's being really sexy, you can feel it, the audience is feeling it. Like, it's just going to be really sexy in that moment. Like, there's just, you've got no option. And my theory of directing puppetry is you're like, we were talking a lot about this today, is you're like, when everyone thinks it, you're like, well, yeah, that's it, like, you're on it. And when everyone's confused, they're like, oh, maybe it's doing this and maybe it's doing that, then, like, you're just not there yet. Like, you just haven't figured out what the puppet's doing. Because if I don't know, as a puppeteer, and the audience don't know, then, yeah, of course, it's just going to die. So, that sort of... Yeah, so I think that thing of, like, thinking technically, I wouldn't say it like that. I'd say it's like thinking about intention and getting in, it's just acting, basically. But you're only doing 1/3 of it, so it's like, that's great. What does that mean?
We've got one, I think we've got time for one more, possibly two.
Yeah,
yes.
Promise it's
Go
not
ahead.
magic.
Love Paul Daniels.
You mentioned the rigorous dramaturgical process
Yes.
you go through in Blind Summit. And you've also talked about working as a director with other companies. Personally, I'm very intrigued in some of the more rigorous dramaturgical processes that people can go through in terms of their theatre. What difference did you find it gave to you both as a director, having a dramaturg available? I don't know if that's something Blind Summit does, having a specific dramaturg, or trying to go through those processes yourself, or even as an actor, as a director, being in a space where there isn't that rigorous dramaturgical process. So those kind of three distinct ideas: having the dramaturg, trying to do it yourself without one, and what it's like working without that dramaturgical process.
So Blind Summit always use do the dramaturgy themselves basically, and will write. And Mark's a writer, and most of the writing comes from improvisation. Although Mark's writing Citizen Puppet at the moment, we very much sit in a room with puppets, and Mark will be like, let's try this line and see what it sounds like when the puppet says it. Puppet dramaturgy is like a whole different thing. We've done stuff where we've tried to make the puppets do scripts, and it's just really hard because you're like, why? Why is that better than a puppet doing it? Better than an actor doing it. I have worked on shows where there wasn't a dramaturg, devised shows where there wasn't a dramaturg. Devised puppet shows. I think this Humanette puppet show, we originally used a dramaturg, and it was an amazing process to push the narrative through. And then this year we didn't have a dramaturg, and we just worked on our own, and we cut loads of stuff and made it a lot simpler, and it was much more about what the puppets could do. And he was someone that hadn't really worked with puppetry before, and it was really great because we would never have got to the place that we needed to get to without him. But then it was really important for the director of the show, who conceived it, for her to then take back control of it and be like, this is what the puppets can do. And what's the third one? Where you wanted a dramaturg.
Well, no, I mean, you kind of answered that because in your initial one you talked about how Blind Summit works without an explicit dramaturg. It's really interesting. There's a couple of people I've met recently who are specifically puppetry dramaturgs.
Oh wow, I didn't even know that was a thing.
I've met recently in London, and it seems that it's a really interesting area to explore in really fleshing out all of these questions about why puppets and how puppets. Anyway, thanks so much. That's pretty much exactly my questions.
That is perfect. Well, I was going to say that we're going to have to wrap it up there. It's flown past. Thank you so much. There's more of these coming throughout the week. There's also a puppetry research conference that I'm trying to plug, which is on the Saturday 1 till 3. So we've got some academics talking about puppetry and research, and that will be interesting. And shows all throughout the week as well. Fiona will be kind of around, so if you did have a quick question, then do grab her.
Thanks very
great,
much.
Thank you. And we are going to Cobalt Studios. If anybody doesn't know where that is, you can follow me. I'll be wearing a hat. I should also say this event is pay what you feel, so no pressure at all, but if you do think it was worth a couple of your well-earned coins, then please do drop them in the bucket on the way out. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.